Iku Turso are a race of giant sentient cephalopods that live in the Arctic Ocean and some other northern seas. Iku Turso are closely related to krakens, but their relationship is only indicated by their similar internal structure with 3 hearts, their lack of a skeleton, their 6 tentacles with suction cups that they use for locomotion, and their blue blood. Other similarities between these 2 species are less evident. An adult male Iku Turso reaches a height of 100 meters, excluding the length of the horns. If we also consider them, then its height will be about 120 meters, which is slightly lower than the giant kraken, whose maximum growth reaches 130 meters. But the Iku Turso is significantly heavier. The weight of a male of this species reaches about 200 tons, against 150 tons for the giant kraken. This difference is due to the fact that Iku Turso have a large layer of subcutaneous fat, which helps them to keep warm in cold conditions. Male Iku Turso are characterized by their large antlers, which resemble those of deer, as well as their large, fleshy bodies, long, flipper-like upper limbs for grasping objects, and long, tentacle-like growths on their chin that resemble a beard. Female Iku Turso are smaller than males, with a maximum height of around 90 meters and a weight of 170 tons. Their bodies are more slender, and their horns are smaller and have a different shape. Females also have tentacle-like appendages, but they are much longer than those of males and grow on their heads, resembling human hairstyles. Also, males differ from females in that they have a pair of small fangs sticking out of their lower jaws. The bodies of Iku Turso are dark purple, but their bellies are slightly brighter, with a purple color and a beautiful wavy pattern that is almost pink. The tentacles and upper limbs are dark purple, while the horns are light green. Additionally, the horns of Iku Turso glow in the dark, as do their tentacle suckers. Eyes are usually blue, but they can also be gray or even green. Iku Turso are omnivorous creatures that feed on whatever they can find in the northern waters. Their diet includes algae, sea sponges, squid, bivalve mollusks, jellyfish, fish, cetaceans, seals, giant crabs, and their favorite food, sea urchins. In times of food scarcity, Iku Turso may resort to hunting dangerous creatures like the devil whale or the royal jellyfish, but this is rare as Iku Turso are not well suited for active hunting. Due to their life in the Arctic waters, most of their body's resources are spent on maintaining their internal heat, leaving them with limited energy for active movement. As a result, Iku Turso are incredibly slow and inactive, which affects their hunting methods. Instead of engaging in open chases, which they are unable to do, Iku Turso rely on clever traps and ambushes. But 60% of their food, such as algae, sea urchins, sea sponges, and mollusks, is grown on special farms. However, don't assume that just because these creatures can't move quickly, they're harmless. In fact, Iku Turso can be quite dangerous if you underestimate them. They're strong, intelligent, and resilient, and their massive weight makes them nearly impossible to knock down. Instead, they're capable of knocking anyone else down if given the opportunity. In addition, male and female Iku Turso have horns that are strong enough to pierce their opponents, although Iku Turso have moral restrictions on their use, which will be discussed later. Finally, they are capable of releasing ink from their tentacle-like appendages. However, this ink differs from the common ink of octopuses and squid, as Iku Turso's ink has a temporary hallucinogenic effect and is highly toxic, causing headaches and nausea for up to a week. But, due to the fact that it takes about a month to replenish the ink supply, this technique is only used as a last resort. These creatures cannot tolerate warm temperatures, so they live exclusively in the northern regions of the world's oceans. The Iku Turso are social creatures whose level of development is quite high. They have mastered polymetal, and like many other advanced underwater races, they use it in all aspects of their lives, from creating household items and tools to jewelry in the massive underwater cities where most of the Iku Turso reside. These cities are similar in structure to those of the krakens or mermaids. They have residential areas where ordinary citizens live, as well as so-called noble districts where the elite lives, who govern the city and ensure order and compliance with laws. In the cities also has public spaces, where they can gather to spend their free time together. There are also farms near the towns of Iku Turso, where, as mentioned earlier, they grow food for their own sustenance. There are about 100 cities in total, each of which typically has a population of 350 individuals. These cities and the territories controlled by the Iku Turso are united under the rule of a single state called the Kingdom of Tursos, which occupies most of the Arctic Ocean and all the surrounding seas, with the exception of the Greenland Sea. The social structure of the Kingdom of Tursos is characterized by a clear hierarchy and a regulated distribution of roles. The society is divided into a ruling class, community members, dependent population, and priests. At the top of the social pyramid is the ruling royal family. King Iku Turso holds the highest authority in the kingdom, which is inherited by the eldest child, regardless of gender. As a symbol of power, the king wields a polymetallic scepter, which is also inherited. His authority is sacred and has never been questioned. King Iku Turso is not only the supreme ruler, but also, according to his subjects, a divine being, a descendant of the sun god Atami, which will be discussed later. The king and his family live in the city of Yuhani, the capital of the Kingdom of Tursos, located beneath the ice of the North Pole at coordinates 90 degrees 0 minutes 0 seconds north latitude. The ruling class of the Kingdom of Tursos includes the nobility and officials who support King Iku Turso. The most important government positions are held by members of the ruling family and the most noble families. The Council of High Officials plays a significant role in decision-making, especially in matters of governance and military campaigns. Each city is governed by governors appointed by the central government, who report directly to King Iku Turso. The majority of the population consists of community members who live in cities. Within each city, individual citizens have their own living space, and labor is mandatory and reciprocal. The priesthood forms a distinct social group and plays an important role in governance. The king appoints the high priest of the solar religion, who holds the title of prophet, usually from among his close relatives. The prophet holds a dominant position among all other members of the sun cult, whom he appoints. All priests wear ceremonial beads as a sign of distinction. The social structure also included dependent population groups. These are subjects of the Tursos kingdom who are not Iku Turso. These are usually representatives of the Selki race, who have a special status in the kingdom. The Selki recognize King Iku Turso as their ruler, and in return, they have extensive autonomy and protection. However, they are not full members of society, and the Selki are not allowed to hold any positions in the government, nor are they subject to the full rights and obligations of citizenship outlined in the constitution. This document is the main law of the Kingdom of Tursos, which outlines all aspects of its citizens' lives. According to the constitution, there is no private property in the Kingdom of Tursos. All cities, apartments, and land around the cities are part of the state's property, and the administration distributes them on behalf of King Iku Turso. In return, every member of the community is required to perform certain tasks for the state, such as building new cities, working in mines, and operating workshops. The government controls the craftsmanship industry. Craftsmen produce ceramics, polymetallic products, and household items, which are then stored in government repositories. The products are distributed among the population based on their social status and duties, ensuring the sustainability of the economic system. They don't have a currency in the traditional sense. The Iku Turso use complex systems of relationships, where community members help each other with tasks such as finding food or performing heavy work, expecting to be helped in return. Of course, the Constitution also mentions the penalties for crimes, which are considered the most severe in the underwater world among all advanced races. Theft is punishable by death. The law is particularly strict regarding theft in temples, public warehouses, and barns. Treason is punishable by death. Murder is punishable by death. Blasphemy is punishable by death. Damage to property is punishable by death. Smuggling is punishable by death. Fighting in a public place is punishable by 1 year of forced labor. If horns were used in the fight, the sentence was extended by 2 years. This is because the horns of the Iku Turso are incredibly sharp, making their use 90% lethal. In addition, the Iku Turso themselves consider their use in battle to be barbaric, so their natural use is not considered positive. The attitude towards the use of horns in battle in their society is similar to the use of bites in a fight among humans. However, horns are still very important in the Iku Turso society, as they are a symbol of maturity. The larger the horns, the more mature the individual is considered and the more attractive it is to the opposite sex. Iku Turso have the right to marry from the age of 25. The pregnancy of females lasts for 2 years. The cub is born fully formed, and until adulthood the parents take care of him, teach him and fully provide for him. However, after reaching adulthood, family ties break and the family breaks up. The exception is the royal family, where unity is needed to transfer power. Iku Tursos are incredible long-lived creatures, living up to 190 years, making them one of the longest-lived underwater races. After death, Iku Tursos are buried by freezing them in underwater glaciers. Iku Turso is a race with an ancient and very rich history. And as always, it is very difficult to determine their exact origin, as they, like other races in the underwater world, have their own opinions about their origins, which directly contradict the opinions of scientists who have tried to study the history of these creatures. And as always, we will analyze these two versions to be objective. According to the Iku Turso legends, their race appeared approximately 25,000 years ago, when the sun god, Atami, created the first Iku Turso from an iceberg. According to the legend, Atami was so impressed by this creation that he decided to create more Iku Turso and ordered them to rule the North Pole. As his representative, Atami created another Iku Turso from a piece of his horn, who would rule over his people. This is where the royal dynasty began. As you can imagine, this version is official and supported by the authorities of the Tursos kingdom, and any other interpretation of this event is considered blasphemous, so even the scientists of Iku Turso support this point of view. However, the opinion of other underwater scientists on the origin of this race is much more complicated. According to research, Iku Turso and the Krakens had a common ancestor, from which two separate species emerged during the late Miocene period, approximately 5 million years ago, and were separated by their habitats. The Krakens in the North Atlantic, while Iku Turso in the Arctic Ocean. At first, they led a rather primitive lifestyle based on tribal relations. However, as they gradually developed, the Iku Turso became more advanced and unified, leading to their complete integration under the leadership of the semi-legendary King Eapli I approximately 25,000 years ago. About 10,000 years ago, the Kingdom of Tursos reached its absolute territorial maximum, stretching from the Arctic Ocean to the Greenland Sea, the North Sea, and even the Baltic Sea. Around 5000 BC, the Iku Turso accepted the Selkie race as their subjects, as they were suffering greatly from humans, especially in the Baltic Sea, and they hoped that the Iku Turso would be able to protect them. In return, the Selkie pledged their eternal loyalty to the Iku Turso. Their hopes were realized, as the Iku Turso began attacking any human vessels, leading to the near extinction of maritime traffic in the Northern Hemisphere. Among the tribes of the Gulf of Finland, there were legends about an incredible horned ice giant who sank ships. However, their freedom of action ended when the Krakens arrived in the Northern Hemisphere around 500 BC. There was a conflict between them and the Iku Turso, who were very territorial creatures, and it escalated into an open war. Of course, the Northerners had nothing to offer against the giant Krakens, and after several years of brutal warfare, the Iku Turso signed a shameful peace treaty with the Krakens. According to the treaty, the Iku Turso ceded all of the Greenland, North, and Baltic seas to the Krakens, agreed to no longer engage with humans, and recognized the Kraken's right to rule over the Arctic Ocean. At the same time, the Kingdom of Tursos did not disappear, it remained but as a protectorate of the Kraken's kingdom. As a sign of their power, the Krakens even built their own city, just 40 kilometers from the capital of the Tursos kingdom. The Iku Turso saw this as a clear humiliation, and they hoped that they would one day regain their influence and independence. However, they lacked the strength to openly confront the Krakens, and any rebellion would only lead to further losses, so they had no choice but to bide their time and accept the terms set by their superiors. Around 200 BC, mermaids arrived in the Arctic Ocean. They hoped to establish new cities there. Iku Turso did not like this, and they refused to allow the newcomers to do so. But the Krakens, who had a good relationship with the mermaids at the time, intervened in the conflict and forced Iku Turso to make concessions and allow the mermaids to build their own cities. This decision would soon play a significant role, as it led to increased trade and improved relations between the Kingdom of Tursos and the Kingdom of the Mermaid. In the 10th century AD, Iku Turso led an open rebellion against the Krakens, which was brutally suppressed. As a result, the Bering Sea was ceded to the Kraken kingdom. After this, the Iku Turso did not lead any more rebellions for almost 10 centuries. The Kingdom of Tursos remained neutral during the Kraken's civil war, although it is known that the self-proclaimed Queen of the Seven Seas, Pearl, offered to form an alliance with them, but King Iku Turso Veli IV, also known as Veli the Peaceful, refused to go to war. In fact, King Veli IV was considered one of the greatest rulers of the Iku Turso. During his reign, the culture of Iku Turso reached its peak, and he was the one who granted the Kingdom of Tursos its constitution. However, everything changed when he died in 1999 and was succeeded by his son, Jalmari II, also known as Jalmari the Warlike. He formed an alliance with Nerissa against the Kraken in the Trident War. During the war, the Iku Turso destroyed the Kraken's Arctic city and inflicted several defeats on them in the Arctic. However, they were unable to provide significant assistance to the mermaids due to their inability to leave the Northern Hemisphere due to their physiology. Despite this, they managed to kill several giant Krakens, which greatly eased the situation for Nerissa. In the battle near the Rockall Isle, the Iku Turso faced off against the Kraken forces led by Princess Agatha, resulting in the defeat of the Iku Turso and the death of Jalmari II. The throne was inherited by his son, who continued the war, but after the Kraken's victory in the Battle of the Trident, he quickly abandoned this idea and signed a peace treaty with the Krakens. According to this treaty, Iku Turso returned all the conquered territories, but the Kingdom of Tursos gained its independence. Currently, the Kingdom of Tursos is the largest state in the underwater world, after the Kingdom of the Krakens. However, after achieving independence, the Iku Turso decided that this was all they needed and officially renounced their territorial claims against the Krakens, adding a clause in their constitution that ensures their eternal neutrality. The Iku Turso have chosen to focus on their internal politics and the issue of global glacier melting, which could pose significant challenges in the future. The Iku Turso relationships with other races vary significantly. The Selkies are their closest friends and allies, and they are gradually gaining more rights in the kingdom. For example, a recent decree allowed Selkies to settle in the cities of Iku Turso. They also have excellent relations with the mermaids, and many mermaids have been able to escape the war with the Krakens and seek refuge at the North Pole. The relationship between the Krakens and the Iku Turso is very complicated. Despite the peace and trade between them, there is still a lot of mistrust due to the Trident War. The Iku Turso have a very hostile attitude towards humans, as they do not like the fact that humans are swimming in their ocean, destroying their ice and catching their fish. However, the situation does not escalate into an open war, as the Iku Turso are well aware of human war capabilities. So, let's move on to the conclusions. The Iku Turso have a rather stern appearance, and their imposing presence, combined with their reserved nature and a very harsh judicial system, has earned them a reputation as cruel, emotionless, and aggressive creatures. In the Karelian Finnish mythology, they are often depicted as ruthless sea monsters. However, upon closer examination, things become more nuanced. Despite their massive and deadly horns, the Iku Turso refrain from using them. Although they are not considered to be the most refined creatures in the ocean, they have still managed to create an advanced civilization, culture, and constitution. In their society, it is common to help others, and they have even taken the defenseless Selkies under their protection, even though it makes no practical sense. The Iku Turso themselves explain this by saying that since they consider themselves to be the rulers of the northern waters, they are responsible for its inhabitants and must provide them with their protection. The Iku Turso are generally not an aggressive race. However, they want others to recognize their right to independence. They are willing to negotiate and make concessions when necessary. They are also not vindictive, and if their neighbors show respect for them, they will reciprocate.